Welcome to our album breakdown of Brockhampton's new album, Roadrunner, New Light, New Machine, and I'm super excited to talk about it because I just recently went super in-depth with their discography, and I was amazed by what I got, and this album just might be their best in my opinion.
Okay, so what do you think, going into the album, let's say, what were your first expectations when you heard, by the way, that they were going to be making a hip-hop album and really trying to stick to that theme and sound?
Yeah, I was surprised mostly by the feature list. Like, this is the most features they've ever had on an album, and I was just super excited to see what type of lane it would be. If it were to be experimental, psychedelic, jazz hip hop. I had no idea what they were going to go for, but I was super impressed.
Not only that, but the track list clocks in at 47 minutes. It is also their I think shortest track list with only 13 songs on it, which is quite remarkable because you have a lot of different collaborators on this project. So fitting that all into 13 tracks is super impressive. So listen, explain to us what we're going to be looking at today and actually our new scoring system.
Yeah, so what we're going to be doing is looking at 5 different categories. So we have content, we have artist performances, which is by looking at the performances of every artist on Brockhampton.
Yeah.
Then we have the features. Then we have the production right after that. And lastly, instant replay, which is us thinking about how this album is going to live with us and if we feel like revisiting it after hearing it the 2 times that we listened to it.
Absolutely. And then after that, the scoring systems go all the way from perfect to amazing. Then we have, I think it's good, mid, and then after that, bad. So you guys would be able to follow through with the rest of the episode. So let's start off with the content because there's a lot of interesting stuff to take out of this track
And by
list.
the way, before we actually get started, guys, let us know in the comments your favorite song on the album because for me, there's not a single miss. And I mean, it started off with a bang, and let's start off with the content. So
exactly.
For me, the biggest takeaway really started to kick in when I heard the song The Light, where you hear Joba going into the experience of his father committing suicide and the personal burden that took on his life. And it goes super deep just because from the first song on Buzzcut, you hear Kevin Abstract saying, "What does God mean to you?"
Yeah.
That's something that he asks you. And then when you go to The Light, you kind of see Joba questioning God, questioning, his fate. And it's interesting because if you remember on Ginger, he was going through the loss of his grandmothers and he actually found God. He sought comfort in God, and that was kind of where he found virtue and kind of peace. But on this album, he's saying like, there's no savior out there for me. And he's kind of going through the early stages of grief, which are kind of denial and anger. And
as you go through the track list as well, you soon to find out that, at least my interpretation is that the mid-album is kind of like that new life, that new restart and the shift in the energy. And then as you approach towards the end of the album, you get songs like, example, Dear Lord, which is Brockhampton's spin on a gospel synth. And everything sounds perfect. It sounds angel-esque, and they're talking about just praising the Lord and praising that higher energy up there, and really serving just your greater purpose, not for anyone else besides yourself. And then obviously you get the Light Part 2, which kind of concludes the whole album. And then after that, it's just kind of confirming that stick through it, because once you do end up getting to that light, it is beautiful, and we promise it is absolutely worth it. So do you think that there was some sort of symbolism for the circle of life and the way that was going into it?
Definitely. And I think the biggest part of that for me was seeing Joba on the album cover. And a lot of people were saying, I don't like this album cover. I don't know what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
But it actually plays into the theme of the album. So if you look at the album cover, you're going to see Joba, and you're going to see kind of, he's shaded in like this white light. Mm-hmm. And what that represented to me was that, like I said earlier, they're kind of questioning God and faith throughout the entire project, but the answer, that savior, that person to kind of guide him was himself. And that's why he's seen within that white light. And it's pretty beautiful to think about, just because for me, his healing process, the way that he's trying to cope with his father's death, was by making this album. Him making this music was his biggest coping mechanism, and that's what kind of saved him from all that pain.
And I liked it because you were able to express that raw emotion throughout the subject matter. Another thing I like about the track list is how it kind of starts in 2 different alter egos. The first half of the album is a bit more dark, it's a bit more grimy, except for the second track, Chain On. Like, that has a bit more of an uplifting sort of production to it, and of course we get a fantastic JPEGMAFIA feature. But throughout the first track, I feel as if that's when it was started to get like really deep, and then the light hits, and then after that it gets lighter as the album comes to an end on the light part 2. So do you think that it was also symbolism for them starting in a certain ego and favoring some sort of other stuff? Because Kevin also spoke about how he wished he didn't sell his soul, and how some really other deep messages about how his mother never really accepted him for being gay, and not only that, but him coming out and meeting his boyfriend Ian really helped him through his healing process with whatever he was happening in his personal life. So do you think that middle of the album was kind of like the ego death, as we like to call it?
Yeah, definitely. And you also see that with Dom McLennan, who raps about, he actually kind of gives an open letter to his mother, thanking her for kind of guiding him to be independent in life. And he thanks her for kind of guiding him in the right direction. And you see a lot of introspection by pretty much every member of the Brockhampton group. You also see it from Matt Champion on the song Count On Me, for example, where he's kind of rapping about just his experiences going through a breakup, and also just how he feels like there's no one that he can count on, knowing that he can kind of rely on.
And I love the vocal effects actually on that Matt Champion verse, and I'm going to read out the starting line to it. It says, who love you at your lowest of lows? I'm in the backyard thinking I need that smoke puffing out of my teeth. So it kind of gives you and sets that imagery for you that these guys are really in an introspective place in their life, and the whole album is just based around symbolism. So based on your thoughts and ideas, do you think, how many listens do you think it's going to take you to really understand the full content of the album?
I mean, I'm 2 listens in, and I think I have a good grasp of what the album's all about. And of course, a big focus is Joba's story, and they kind of cater towards that. But overall, I think that with every listen, I'm gonna pick up more from the actual content matter. So overall, I think when you're looking at the content matter for this album as a Brockhampton album, it's perfect.
It is perfect.
You got everything that you wanted, and it's their most in-depth, it's their most personal work, and it feels like their most cohesive album.
It does, because there was one gripe that we had with a bit of their previous projects was that the content matter was a bit static. It was a lot of, obviously, it was beautiful. There was a lot of self-acceptance. There was a lot of love stories, but it felt a bit too consistent at a certain point. And when you were going through the track list, it did get redundant. But in this, there was always something new. But talking about Brockhampton as a whole, we know how many members there are in the group, and we know how it can get a bit messy, but what they're good at is their chemistry. So that leads us into artist performance. Who do you think had the best performance on the project?
On the whole album, I would have to give it to Joba.
Joba definitely.
Yeah, it was so emotional, and on the song "The Light Part 2," when he's rapping about how the hardest thing for him is the way that the passing of his father affected his mother, you actually kind of hear him gasping for air because he can't finish the verse, and that rawness, that emotional value that you get from the album is what makes it. And that's what made his performance amazing, is that it just felt so genuine and real.
I would also have to say shout out to Kevin Abstract, because the way that he started off the project was on a really high energy note, and I love the sort of guidance that he kind of has in the shift of the chemistry. Like if there's no Kevin Abstract, there's no Brockhampton, and we know that because he's also the main executive producer on all of their projects, and we know what type of glue he is to all of these track lists. And I feel as if, like, example, if you didn't have him on songs like Buzzcut, then it may have felt a bit empty, and there might have not been that Brockhampton influence. And someone else I want to shout out is actually Matt Champion, because the type of rapping that he does with Dom McLennan on this project is really nice. Dom McLennan was a bit, I would say, overshadowed. He didn't have as many verses as everyone else, but Matt Champion was on a big portion of it. So what do you think was his best performance on all of them?
Dom McLennan?
No, Matt Champion.
Matt Champion's best performance probably on Count On Me. I really liked his verse there. But yeah, like you were saying, Dom McLennan didn't get too many verses. I think he has 3 appearances on the entire album, but to me, every single verse he had, especially on songs like Chain On, he proved to me at least that
he washed JPEGMAFIA.
Yeah, he's the best rapper out of Brockhampton in terms of just rapping ability. It has to go to Dom in front of everyone else.
Yeah, Chain On is definitely one of the best. Well, Dom McLennan's verse on Chain On is definitely one of the best of the whole project, in my opinion. It's extremely lengthy, and you see that JPEG and both Dom McLennan deliver a crazy verse with length, but it doesn't seem to really run out, and it doesn't seem to feel redundant or dragged on. That was what I liked about it.
One guy that I do have to shout out who might be my favorite member on Brockhampton is Bareface.
Bareface, okay.
And his vocals are angelic throughout the entire album, and I mean, his performance on Dear Lord, it was...
Wow.
His harmonizing was on point, and you'll never hear him out of pitch. You'll never hear him missing a single note. His vocals are perfect, and honestly... Like, we need that solo album from Bareface.
We do, and Bareface is really good for this whole chemistry because he usually likes to close off the projects with some harmonizing.
With like a solo track,
exactly.
Usually, yeah.
It's usually a solo track, so it kind of felt like that through Dear Lord, but obviously they were all coming together in some in a choir-esque sort of form and delivered on the gospel sim. So
and he also only had 3 appearances. That's one thing. I feel like they kind of underutilize him for a lot of the projects.
But I think they kind of need to, though.
They kind of need to because especially for this one, it was more hip-hop focused, and he doesn't really rap, so it kind of makes sense, but I want to hear more Bareface.
Put him where you could.
Always.
But that's the one guy that I really wanted to hear about was Don McLennan. So out of the artist performance, what type of rating would you give it?
In terms of everything, I mean, I think that they all performed really well, and as an overall rating, I would probably go with
I would go with amazing.
I'd go with amazing, yeah.
I would go. It was an amazing performance by all of them. We got some of the rawest material, that we've ever heard on a Brockhampton track. Shout out Joe, but shout out Kevin Abstract. Like, they absolutely guided this project. And then you obviously had the complimentary verses from Matt Champion and Don McLennan, with obviously the 3 appearances that he made. But it obviously made the track list a lot more cohesive. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed every performance. It sounded like there was so much passion throughout these recordings. But let's move on to the actual features themselves, because this was a big topic within the project. A lot of people were talking about, hey, never had features on Brockhampton albums. Is it going to sound too clustered, especially with a 13-track album? So what were your first thoughts going into this, just with the features alone?
I mean, I think like everyone else, I was super hyped to see A$AP Rocky on there, man.
Facts.
And the fact that he was on, not one song, but 2. Mm-hmm. And look, he doesn't have, let's say, a full-on fledged verse, but,
It does it, though. It definitely does it. I find like the A$AP Rocky features were actually needed to a certain point, because it wasn't like he was delivering full verses. I think he had a couple of hooks.
He had an opening verse on Count on Me, which was really kind of short.
And then he had a bridge on Bankroll. He had a bridge on Bankroll.
And then you hear his ad-lib kind of play along throughout the whole song. And that
towards
was super
the end
cool.
of the song with Matt Champion, and then their vocals bleed in together, which was super fucking cool.
He brought a lot of charisma. I have to say that. So.
How did you feel about the Charlie Wilson feature?
That was really good. I loved him on the hook, and he was great. His vocals were super on point. Same thing with Shawn Mendes. I think that he did his thing too. And it was kind of unexpected to see those names, but it really fit the aesthetic of the albums for those more pop-centric tracks. It worked,
It did fit it. And what do you think about A$AP Ferg's part on Bankroll? Because he started off that verse with tons of energy. He had a couple of flow switches as well, and that was something I was like reading through the Genius lyrics, and I was matching every time he would have a flow switch, and it sounded super energetic. Plus, since like 2012, I think he's never really switched up his ad-libs, and I love it. So how do you feel about him coming onto this album, and how did it fit the aesthetic?
It was a cool verse. I mean, it was kind of your standard A$AP Ferg verse. It did its thing, like you said, nice flow switches. The energy was there, and he's kind of rapping about his wealth and a lot of braggadocious bars. So it was definitely cool. I think that it definitely fit the vibe of the track, so I was happy with it. My favorite feature on the entire album, though, has to go to Danny Brown and Buzzcut.
Yes, sir.
And it's just amazing just because not many artists can rap that well on such an unorthodox beat. Like, it's hard to rap on a Brockhampton beat.
He did a lot only in 16 lines.
Exactly. And that beat was similar to something you would have gotten off of Gummy or Boogie. And the reason for that is because you have the distorted bass, and Danny Brown did not waste a single second. As soon as he started rapping, went on a lyrical rampage, and he blew me away.
But it also gave me some Atrocity Exhibition sort of vibes as well. Like, he was wasting no time on his verse, and there was a lot of stuff just about, self-tuition and just like personality checks. Don't fuck with me sort of Danny Brown, which I always like to see.
But I wanted to hear Merlin Wood on that song, because Merlin their aesthetics, him and Danny Brown would have went so well together.
Crazy. If Merlin would have had a part to close off the song, then I would have enjoyed it. But hey, whatever. It can't be a perfect world. But shout out to JPEGMAFIA, because he delivered such a beautiful verse, and it was something where he talks about how people didn't used to fuck with him before he was popping, and now everyone wants to try to hop on the train and sort of benefit where he's coming from. And then he's going back and forth with these personal anecdotes, and it really makes sense for me, because he did take the time he needed. He took half of the track with Don McLennan, but it was much needed throughout the track list, and I feel as if it also gave you a break from maybe hearing Matt Champion or Kevin Abstract too much in the first 3 tracks. So definitely shout out to JPEG. So how do you feel about the general flow of it?
I would say overall the features were definitely needed. I think that they added a lot to adding kind of excitement to the track list. I don't feel like they maybe added necessarily too much to the actual concept of the album, but they were still needed, and they still really had good chemistry with the Brockhampton members.
I liked it. I think it was just more of an extra for me. I feel as if Brockhampton would have been able to execute this project.
We could see that it was good.
It was good. It wasn't great. It wasn't anything amazing or perfect. It was like that perfect middle. Like, okay, it was
worked,
good.
Yeah.
What it's supposed to be, because you never really want, like, obviously you want stacked feature lists, but you're not really going into, like, MBDTF or an album like that, which, by the way, is a main inspiration for this album, which you told me, and 2001, which is pretty cool. I don't know where that comes from, but regardless. So going on to the next topic. This one is big because Brockhampton albums are always mixed and engineered to perfection. Shout out Romeo and Kevin Abstract, who had the majority of the producing credits on this. And I love what they did on this. It was a mixture of emotional rides. I love the reverbs that they put on some of the voices at times, and the engineering was perfectly done. But where do you think it started with the transitions? How did you feel about the overall layout of the production within the track list?
I definitely love what they did on the beat for Chain On, because they kind of have a loop playing throughout that entire beat, which
it's
is
like do 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 do.
Yeah,
okay,
and
perfect.
it's unfamiliar for Brockhampton to use loops, but it was amazing. And then I love how that transitioned into Cream by Wu-Tang Clan.
Oh my goodness,
that
was
sample was phenomenal.
Sample was absolutely phenomenal. But another one I really like is actually Windows. Windows was a fantastic track because the light was such a flippin' energy, and then after that, like, you had So Gone So Flexy go on to this. It was a decent verse. I enjoyed it, but this really, really, really nice production, and it gave me New York vibes. Like that's like what Frank had said that before, like he was hearing it a bit, and New York vibes, like that's low-key what I got out of it. And a lot of the track list also has a lot of pop features as well. There's always that sort of element with Brockhampton. So do you think that fit the album as well?
Yeah, I definitely did. But what I do love is the fact that you legitimately had some rock beats on this album.
That is facts.
And my favorite one has to be On the Light, where it's kind of driven by this electric guitar melody, really well fine-tuned, and the beat kind of, it puts you on edge. It's uncomfortable, and it matches Joba's rapping, because he's uncomfortable while he's talking about, the passing of his father and all of that anger that he has. And it just matched the production perfectly. And then we also got another guitar-driven beat on What's the Occasion. That was phenomenal. And we got Chad Hugo to produce a song.
That was fire. I couldn't believe the Chad Hugo feature. That's actually amazing. So, and you definitely hear Chad Hugo's influence in the track. So I'm definitely with that. One of my favorite actual productions on this too is Dear Lord. It's not necessarily the most complex production out of all of them, but the way that their vocals were engineered and the way that everything was placed within that track was near seamless, and it made it almost seem like Kevin Abstract was in the middle of the choir as well, and then you could hear how everything was pitched to a certain point, and throughout certain pauses in the production, you could actually hear their breaths. You could hear them sort of slowing down on something. So I feel like they actually kept that raw, genuine feeling within the actual engineering and mastering. So with that being said, how do you feel about the production?
Production was amazing. From the guitar-driven beats to the distorted bass-heavy beats that we got in the beginning of the track list to more of the pop-centric beats. Everything really fit the aesthetic of the album, and even though there was a huge range of beats, it still all meshed really well together.
That is true, and that's something that Brockhampton just does super well, is they introduce all kinds of different aesthetics, and I think that's why we have to consider them experimental, is just solely on the type of production that they're bringing in. Is like, you'll go through a whole track list, and yes, you'll get more melodic productions, you'll get, maybe we got loops on this, you'll get, maybe some soul samples, you'll get rock beats, but then again, it still fits in within the parameters of Brockhampton's aesthetic, and that's what I love about it. It felt like home, and yes, I do got to say that this was an amazing produced album.
Let's go on now to the instant replay of the album. So you've heard it one or two times at this point,
yes,
right? And after those couple of listens, Do you see yourself revisiting it, and if so, why?
I do, and it's going to be something that's going to be in my rotation for a while. I think the types of content matter that we got on the album, so a lot of the stuff about, you know, the new energy and that new light, and, you know, everything going on with, you know, once you come to that realization, that moment, the truth, boom, it's like another path and another journey. Like, there's so many different parallels I feel as if I missed throughout the project just because they were too complex or they flew over my head. I would have to go back to it. Not only that, but I would want to also go over rhyme structures. Like, well, we have some really good lyricists on here. Example, like, I want to go through Danny Brown's full verse and like really depict it apart. So I think I'm gonna be on this for a while, and I have to think like this is actually perfect replay value just because it'll keep you going back every time. Not only that, I know I'm dragging on a bit, but this is the type of project that, you know, you can't go back to only one song. Once you start the album and you finish it. It's really to hear the concept and how everything flows together.
This is the first time in a long time where I hear an album and I'm addicted to it. I heard it 2 times already, and I want to go back for a third listen. Like when we were driving over to the studio here, I was already playing it for a third time, trying to get my third listen because the music's amazing. But like you said, the themes within the album are so intricate, and I'm always picking up on something new with every listen. For example, if you look at the end of the song Bankroll, you hear them. One of the lines is, "I'm going into the sunken place," and I don't know if you watch the movie Get Out, where you see the sunken place where it's kind of like you're conscious, but you don't really have control over your actions. And that relates to the next song. After Bankroll, you have The Light, where Joba raps about being like, you know, my father's gone, he committed suicide, and I couldn't do anything. It's like he was in the sunken place, where he was conscious, but he couldn't do anything to kind of stop his father from committing suicide at the end of the day.
Incredible.
He felt helpless. So it was, like I said, the themes within this album, the overall concept of trying to find that light, to
and
try
that
to find that
the
inner peace.
It's beautiful.
It was beautiful.
And this is why I think I'm going to have to actually give this album an amazing rating. It's not perfect.
It's amazing. Amazing album.
It's not perfect, but it is amazing. It was definitely the greatest effort I've seen so far in the year. This is an album that has a load of potential to become the album of the year. And if it doesn't get a Grammy nom on anything at that, because I would also love to see how they're going to roll out their visuals. They always have fire visuals. I'm going to be quite mad because this is actually a fantastic project. So
I think it's going to take a lot for another album to pass this, and they said they're dropping 2 more albums and then they're done. So they have a lot of pressure to live up to this album, this Roadrunner album.
Well, I think they
could,
based on 2017. I think they could definitely do it. But guys, thank you for coming into the review. Let us know in the comments section what was your favorite track on the project. And guys, we're going to be reviewing all the new music that comes out on every Thursday night. We'll have them out by the Friday.
And guys, fill out your score sheets as we go through it with us. And let us know in the comments how you felt about every single category that we covered. And it was a pleasure to see you guys on this one.
Thank you so much, guys, for watching the episode. Listen, we got a lot of stuff going on here at NFR. You guys could join our community by joining our Discord chat. It's absolutely popping. The link is going to be in the bio, guys. And listen, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and the notification tabs. We're doing daily content here at NFR Podcast. Thank you guys for sticking in, and I'll see you on the next one.